Before we get started, federal securities laws require us to make the following disclosures. Investing involves risk. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk. Therefore, it should not be assumed that future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable, suitable for your portfolio or individual situation, or prove successful. No portion of this call shall be construed as an offer or solicitation for purchase or sale of any security. Additional disclosures on our website, cmgprivatewealth.com and metric-financial.com. Everyone on the call today is an investor in Rose and or Smartech, perhaps into ELUX and other things we're doing in the banking side of the business with these direct investments. Richard, if you recall, is a partner in New Ventures, now Scientia Ventures. They renamed their venture capital fund, and their focus is on biopharma, bioag, of course. You'll be familiar from one of their other funds, and possibly an investor in Cebus. We're here talking about Rose and Smartech, and then we're going to touch on one other company, Elux. There's some updates to share. Richard's background, if you haven't gone to scientiavc.com, you'll see the bios of the team and Richard's bio there. We won't go into to your bio today, Richard, because I think everybody's pretty familiar with it. Richard's a unique skill set. He's a PhD in molecular biology. He has a law degree, and in the 90s became one of the go-to people for doing patents for bio tech types of ventures. He's got a lot of experience. I'm invested from a point of transparency in their first fund that dates back to 2006, in their third fund that was open and then subsequently raised their capital and closed in 2018, and have witnessed and grown close. Well, witness a lot of it's done well for us, well for me personally, and our business model essentially, when it relates to anything Rose, Smartech, is and if you recall, I give Mark Finn a call, who I'm a huge fan of, and say, what are your favorite high conviction ideas, and what company needs help? And then we come in, and the attractive side is to invest directly with some of these companies. And to shape this, there's a way of thinking about wealth that we deeply believe in, and we call it core explore. Get the core bucket safe, and build that out, diversify it. And let's say, for example, we can take 80% of the core bucket. We need to grow that at 7% a year to get that capital back to even. And then that affords us the ability, we believe, to go aggressively risk on with investments that we seek 10x or more inside of, let's say, a 5 to 10 year period of time. And if we're taking a swing at the pitch, let's say a 1% allocation to something like Rose, a 1% allocation of our net worth, we've got 80% that's getting back to even. We need 7% a year to do it. We believe we can do better than that 7% per year. And then if we allocate that remaining 20% bucket in a diversified set of high conviction, let's call them bets, we're looking to create wealth with these types of opportunities. So there's a lot of advancements since we last talked to you about Smartech and Rose. So Richard, why don't we have you dive in there? First, give us an update, and then we'll talk a little bit about some other things.
Sure thing. And thank you all for making the time, and apologies for the tardiness in getting on to the actual call. So let me start with Rose Pharma. One great piece of news that happened just this week is that Lynn Sullivan, who's been on our board and a short-time consultant with us, who comes from Novo Nordisk, who you'll recognize as the leader in weight loss drugs, has agreed now to join us as a three-quarter-time consultant, acting as our chief business officer, and brings a host of value on potentially raising larger amounts of money, or even helping in an exit. She is involved already with our other board members in working with bankers on this deal, which bankers are also quite keen on the deal and believe that we actually could see an exit this year, either as a straight out buyout or as the $25 million sort of investment that we're looking for in order to get to the next stage. So right now, as you may recall, this is an investment that you've all made in a $2 million round, or even maybe in a prior round, on a safe note, which will convert if we raise either the 25 million or if we do an exit of the type I was just talking about. And your cap on that was 42 million, but it will be discounted to any investment that comes in that would reduce that cap, which I doubt we would see, but there's always an opportunity. Prior rounds, as you know, were in the last year were at a cap of I think it was 28 million and 35 million. So I don't know which round you guys are all in, but well done on getting in that time. There's still a small amount of the $2 million round to go, so not too late to get in on this opportunity.
Richard, just to set some footing, most of the people are invested in the first two rounds.
Perfect. All right.
Mhm.
They did a good job. Um, so um, the just to remind you, this is about a drug called Rose 10. It's a fast-acting and short-duration GLP-1. We were developing it originally for treatment of acute pain in IBS, and for weight management. The IBS pain affects about 13 or 14% of the US population, but there is no approved FDA treatment. It's a billion plus market, and people right now are desperate for it because they are using opiates, which are not only counterindicated, but also can be habit forming and detrimental from other reasons. So we hope to be able to get this to them as soon as we can. We are all set for a phase 2B trial, so a very advanced trial. And we just need to raise at least $7 or $8 million for that part of the plan, which is part of that 25 million I was talking about. On the weight management side, oh, and by the way, of course, we have intellectual property that covers that aspect of the thing with the formulation that we're using for treatment of IBS pain and for the weight management. In the weight management side, we also have IP that's pending on being, we believe, the first to work out how to manage weight that has already been lost and maintain it. You'll probably realize from prior discussions that existing GLP-1s are very heavy-handed, and they help you lose a lot of weight, but most people can't stand it and will just give up after even a few weeks. And they certainly don't last the year or two to get to the full weight loss. And then they obviously are surprised to say, well, you have to stay on that drug for the rest of your life because once you stop, you'll gain all the weight back on again. So they've been doing what they call microdosing, taking a little bit of the drug and hoping that that will be enough. But the way I look at that is that it's like trying to put a tack into the wall so you can hang a picture. And you need a little teeny tack hammer to get it in so you don't ruin the wall, ruin the tack, or anything else that might be ruined. And these existing GLP-1s are like a sledgehammer trying to put that tack into the wall. Yeah, it'll do it, but it'll probably destroy the tack, bend it, or destroy the whole wall around it. So you need something that is designed for the end job. And we believe that we're the only one able to do that, and the only ones developing this short-acting, short-duration, short half-life GLP-1. So we believe that we had an analysis done, and the market there is a $2 billion plus market. Although, if you think about it in the long term, if you need to be on these drugs, just like a diabetic needs to be on insulin for the whole life, and let's say your life expectancy is another 40 or 50 years, the Wegovy Saxendas, the heavy-handed, the sledgehammers, are getting maybe 1 or 2 years of that time, whereas we would be there for the rest of your life. So the area under the curve, as it were, for the amount of money that could be made from this is tremendous. So we think it's a very much a superior drug for all of the others.
Can I jump in
So,
for a second, Richard?
yeah, please.
So the Wegovys, the Ozempics, the Modernos, they're they last in the system for a week or more. So the typical patient is taking that shot. It lasts a week, so you're getting this heavy dose in the body. And with Rose 10, it's closer to mimicking what happens to, let's say, a healthier person who fires a GLP-1 that signals to the brain, I'm full, stop eating. That's a quick action. So that's what you mean in half-life. That's a very quick half-life in the body. And then Rose 10 is roughly 20, 30 minutes in the body, and then it moves through. So you utilize it daily before a major meal, and you think that's where a bulk of the edge is in the IP that you have.
Thank you, Steve. And so where are we on that one? So last year we finished a what I call a phase one study, showing that indeed we do have appetite suppression using our Rose 10. And we are now about to finish, we may even had all enrollment done by now, but we'll have the results in March from a phase 2A study, which will demonstrate appetite suppression and control of eating habits, slower eating with no hunger rebound. We're worried that if you cause somebody to eat less, they'll want that food back again, and that's not happening. And there's also you get some small transient side effects like nausea or whatever it might be, but they are very much resolved very quickly. They don't hang around like the other big ones. So we believe that on that indication, we'll also be ready for a phase 2B trial, hopefully starting later this year once we raise the funds for it. So we're set to complete two phase 2B trials. We think the timing on that will be about a year or so to finish each of those. At the same time, that they're about $7 to $8 million each, so it's about $15 million. The reason I'm saying I want to raise another 10 million, and not from this group, by the way, this will be from a strategic. But the reason we raised another 10 is in order to get ready for phase 3, which would be the market approval trial, where we need to make sure that we're producing sufficient drug at the right quantity and quality in order to proceed forward. So that's pretty much the story for Rose 10. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're looking to get either to raise the 25 million and start those two trials, or go forward and potentially have a merger and an acquisition with a big pharma. I did just come from a meeting at JP Morgan, which is the big biotech meeting every year in January. And one of the comments from a lady who was from J&J is, why aren't we inundated with strategics trying to acquire us? And my answer to that was, we have kept a low profile. We're just now starting to announce our results, and the reaction to that has been very, very positive. Um, uh, so I think we may well see a lot of activity in the near future on this, especially now
Can
that,
I shape a little bit more around that too?
yeah, please.
Sorry to interrupt, Richard. So,
Okay.
what in the perspective of looking for large asymmetric type of return opportunities, this is a perfect example of the type of company that we're after. Our valuation, the first round was 28 million that investors got in. So if you got in at that round, good. The next was 35 million, and now there's an additional 2 million, of which the bulk of that has been raised. I think somewhere around 1.5 per my conversations yesterday with Jack. And so we'll finish that off, raising that final amount. Next steps, I want to give everybody a little bit of sense of kind of what happens and where the exits and when exits might be for companies like this. So what we do know is that Roche bought another GLP-1, I forget the name of the company that they bought, that doesn't have a phase 2A safety trial, which Rose went through because of the irritable bowel first indication that Rose was going after for $2.7 billion. So what is, your sense, Richard, of when, almost like the J&J person who approached you, when do you are you actively talking to bankers, and what you're thinking on timeline?
Yeah, yeah. So we do have a banker who is engaged with us now, a very very top level one. I can't give you the name. And they are looking to go out right now, or at least by March, when the data from the phase 2A study is available. And the example you just gave of the one exit, that was a phase one, like a Me Too. I call them like Me Too's. You got another Wegovy or Saxenda out there. None of them are designed for what we are looking at, which is weight maintenance as opposed to weight loss. Yes, ours will be good for weight loss. It probably won't be up there with the 25% weight loss, but I was actually talking yesterday to an interested party, and more for the Asian market, which is a good example where they don't have as much obesity as we do in the West, and they're looking for losing, 5% or something like that. And there's no drug that really is designed for them. This is so they would be able to start on Rose 10 itself as a weight loss drug and then just keep on going as a weight maintenance, and not have all of the side effects and issues that you have with these big drugs. You can also do that here, but it'll take longer to lose the weight, which is in some ways a good way to go as well, regardless.
So your
Um,
market study that you did that analyzed maybe it could be a couple billion-dollar annual sales at I guess that's at peak estimated peak sales.
yeah,
That's based on this being really more of a maintenance drug
yeah,
and capturing
yeah.
those that jump off of the Wegovy's, Ozempics that just aren't comfortable with the constant nausea feeling.
Yeah, there's a massive upside to that. This is a very conservative view of that market. The market itself is 100 to 200 billion. And so, once people lost weight, the more people come into the market, have lost weight and saying, what do I do now? That increases the size of our market. So, of course, we cannot really predict what that will be. We just know it'll be a very large number. But regardless, drugs like this are pursued even if it's just $1 billion market. And here we have two separate. The way I look at it is whoever is willing to take this on, and we've had people approach us just for the IBS side. You get the IBS one, which is $1 billion market, therefore worth going after, already in phase 2B, already for phase 2B. And you have the potential upside to, you take that one and get it done. But at the same time, you've got the huge upside from the weight maintenance aspect as well. So doing the two trials gives you two shots on goal with a drug that is unique and has IP protection. I didn't mention, of course, that we have other IP protection, which is on, this is an injectable right now, which is totally adequate. When you go with the oral drugs, which are becoming more available now, you still have actually more side effects. It's more toxic because you're using a lot more drug to get it in there. And so many people don't prefer that. We have one that will be inhalable, like when you have asthma and you suck in the drug. We have a patent on how to do that. And we're looking into, we may have to raise a little bit more money for that, but we're looking into developing that aspect as well. So we could have two different modes of administration. The amount of drug needed for each of those indications, for the IBS one and for the weight maintenance, is slightly different. It's 100 micrograms for IBS and 150 micrograms for the weight maintenance. So we could do one as an inhalable and one as an injectable. The IBS one certainly makes sense for an injectable because the pain that you observe in IBS is in your tummy area. And we've had patients on the phase 2A trial say they loved the idea of being able to stab at the tummy area with their needle. I mean, you don't feel the pain because it's a tiny needle, but at least they're stabbing in the area that needs to be treated, and at least from what their mind is telling them. So I think injectable, and we had a survey done, which we published on now, where 95% of people who would be using that would have no problem with an injectable. So very small number of people, like myself, probably who don't like needles and don't have to take insulin, are very lucky from that point of view. But I think if you have these indications or these diseases, you're more than happy to stab yourself. And also, you get a needle which is a 30-day supply. So you don't, you just one device that gives you a 30-day supply. Um, or a 30-unit supply, I should say, because obviously with IBS, you're only using it intermittently, maybe hopefully only once a week or twice a week. On the weight loss, you're using it on demand, that you don't have to use it any particular time. If you want a day off, you can have a day off. It really depends on how you're doing from a point of view of making sure you don't eat too much. And if you feel that you need it, you take a stab 30 minutes before you eat, and off you go. If we can make it so that's the inhalable, then you'll take the inhaler. Again, the inhalers are a bigger package than maybe an injectable needle. So it'll be, we might have to do a survey to see which is the better way to go, or whoever hopefully acquires this from us would do such a survey.
So I have some questions that have come in. Mike, do you have a question before I jump
Yeah,
into?
I was just going to ask Richard, is there a is there a point in the various phases that the drug goes through where, big pharma becomes particularly interested? I mean, you mentioned phase 2A or B, and then phase 3. Is that like, is there a point at which big pharma is, okay, I want to see you get to this point?
Yeah, so it will depend. It's a great question because Big Pharma have been acquiring at phase 1, which is very, very early on.
Right.
It's unusual for them to do that. When when I was talking to that lady I was telling you about, and I told her I was in phase 2B, she was kind of shocked that it hadn't already been acquired. So we are in a perfect time right now, which is why I think the bankers are ready to move, because we already are phase 2B ready. And we will have the results from the phase 2A trial imminently. And that's what we can use as a sort of kicking off point, announcing that, sort of showing the world that we exist. And I would expect to get a lot of activity at that time. Normally, companies will depend on when they want to get in a competitive market like this. And there've been probably 10 or 12 acquisitions in the last couple of years, all in the $2 billion plus range. They've mainly been in the phase 1 to phase 2 range. There are very few phase 2 assets right now out there to be acquired. And so we think it's a very competitive market. If we started phase 2B, then that actually might slow us down, because then everybody will say, well, I need to wait for the results of that. And that would put us back a year. On the other hand, of course, even though it puts us back a year, the results from that phase 2B will allow us to charge even more for the sale of the asset. So it's not a bad thing. I think the hiatus we have right now of the ending of the phase 2A before we start phase 2B will allow us, one, to raise the money for the phase 2B, and two, to potentially have the acquisition that we're looking for.
As part of the marketing plan, sorry, last question, I'll let the other folks ask, but it's part of the marketing plan to potentially capture, or at least, the message of capturing folks who are coming off, the sledgehammer, Wegovy's and things that you were referring to
Yeah.
earlier. As you're transitioning off of those, here's the perfect, product for you. And what is that transition like? Is it seamless for users of, the sledgehammer drugs?
Yeah, we haven't had experience in doing that yet. We've not done a clinical study yet, which is following the people who've already lost the weight. That's the study that will be a phase 2B study. So we can start off with the several types of people: ones who've never lost weight before, are naive to the drug; those who've have just come off of the Wegovy Saxendas, or multiple different people that are coming out of that and want to come in. And those who are naive to the drug and have very little weight to lose, and see how they react to it. So that'll come out of a phase 2B study.
Great, thanks.
Okay, let me jump. Elliot asks, MDs are increasingly suggesting pre-diabetics go on low-dose GLP-1s for the rest of their lives, specifically to lower sugar 24/7. Can this drug do that even though it's once a day?
Well, it is once a day, but it can be used 2 or 3 times a day. You could use it before every meal if you wanted to. I don't know the answer as to whether it will lower glucose. This is not developed as a diabetic drug, and in fact, it won't work for treatment of diabetes. It is designed for the 2 indications that we're talking about, and particularly for the weight maintenance.
That's actually a good point. When Ozempic came out, it was for people that have diabetes. And what they were noticing was the significant weight loss. They then did weight loss trials and rebranded the exact same medicine with the exact same dosage, Wegovy, for weight loss. So same sort of thing. So I'd imagine it has to go through some sort of diabetic type of
Yeah.
trials and before you're able to do that. Okay,
Yeah.
Stephen asks, what's the half-life of Rose? Will people likely want to use it more than once a day?
We believe the half-life is less than an hour, probably around 30 minutes or so, compared to the native GLP-1 that normal people have, and will be expressed as soon as you start eating and stop you from eating too much. This is only it has a 2 or 3 minute half-life. This is a one amino acid change. This is a peptide, which is a chain of amino acids. We've just changed one amino acid at one end to a valine, and that extends the half-life, but doesn't extend the remaining biology of it. So the you only need to use it once a day, mainly for the main meal. I would recommend it mainly at dinner time. But again, those are things that we can investigate with the phase 2b trial. But it really depends. If you use it 3 times a day before every meal, it's like that's like what do you call it? A walker. And if you use it once a day, that's like a crutch, is the way I look at it. Is that if you want to be really, really balanced, you take it the 3 times a day. I really doubt that there'll be a large percentage of people doing that. I think it will mainly be just once a day, just to keep the edge off, so you don't overeat on that main meal of the day.
He also asked, are there plans for a separate company? I think what he's saying is basically breaking out the irritable bowel problem and separately from the weight loss element.
We aren't planning that. There has been discussions. The reason being, it's the same drug. It'll be a different dosing. But any big pharma that acquires this from us will want to make sure they have both indications. It would be very challenging for them to allow another big pharma to do the other indication. That's not to say it can't be done. And certainly we have the ability to do whatever we want. So if a company comes along and says, we're just going to do IBS. At that time, I would probably sell them only a license to that. We don't need to form a separate company for it. It can all go through the one company. We'd license that out and say you will have a competitor for the weight maintenance unless you do something about that.
Okay.
And we can make sure that the branding and the all of the other aspects are protected. So it will make it more challenging to sell the weight maintenance aspect. So we'll be balancing the pros and cons on anybody doing that.
Brian asks, are the OTC GLP-1 supplements that are currently on the market a threat to Rose 10? I think you answered
Um, so all of those OTCs are and I'm not sure what you mean by supplement. Yeah, I think you mean the GLP-1s themselves, but they're sledgehammers. They're all heavy dosing ones. So I don't think they're a threat. Rose 10 is opening up a brand new avenue for treatment of weight maintenance as opposed to weight loss. Yes, it can be used for weight loss, and in that, all of those supplements would be competitors. But for weight maintenance, which is a much longer life of 30, 40 years of the patient, we don't know of anybody who's really a threat to that because they've not been developed. They're trying to do microdosing. And so you're trying to take a small amount of a drug that is a sledgehammer. A sledgehammer is still a sledgehammer, however, much of it you take.
Got it. Okay, last question here, and then we'll move forward. So William asks, unit sizes, please. William, typically it's 100,000. We've 50,000 is generally okay. And frankly, we've put a few people in for 25,000. So we've had to twist Richard's arm, but we've been able to do that. The bigger point there from my perspective is you want to do enough that it's meaningful to move your needle. That if it's the win that we hope it is, that it's material, and keep it kind of at a 1% of a total liquid net worth, depending on age and how aggressive and that sort of thing, maybe 2%. But we'd like to size these things in a way that it's not too small, that it's really not going to have an impact on your wealth, and not too big that if it doesn't work the way we hope it's going to work, it doesn't blow up your ship.
Actually, Robert has a question here. I've now opened the question. Rose 10 is not taken orally, but we have been approached by a company to offer to develop it as an oral drug. The trouble with oral, as I said, is that you have to take a lot more of the drug in order to get it into the system, and it's slower acting. So it's not really my favorite mode. Whoever purchases this or acquires this asset will obviously be able to make that decision. So it's an option that's on the table. Um, with regard to injecting yourself before every meal, you only need to do it mainly for the main meal. You have the optionality of being able to do it more frequently if you so choose. And with regard to the cost, we don't know what the cost will be. We're using 150 micrograms. To put that in perspective, it's 2,400 micrograms for Wegovy Saxenda, and it's 4,800 micrograms for when you're taking it orally right on some of those. So we're talking about a fraction of the amount of drug. The way that the drug is made is chemical right now. So as you enlarge the batch size on that, obviously the cost goes down. There's also a potential way of making it as a biologic, which actually has some implications from an intellectual property point of view, would give us a lot more protection. So if we think that this is really going to take off, that's an option as well, and it could be developed in the same timeline as we're developing to get the approval of the drug.
Huh. Can you give biologics? Do you have to do it intravenously for biologics, or
No,
can you?
it's the same drug. It's just produced biologically. And this is a peptide.
Oh,
So peptides can be made chemically, or they can be made to express from a microbe that is causes to express it, and then you isolate it from that microbe.
huh.
So,
Okay,
yeah,
got it. All right. Let's shift gears to Smartech.
sure thing. So Smartech is doing very well. We're raising right now $6 million on a $30 million pre-money, so $36 million post-money. The prior round was at about half of that valuation, and we had to stop the round because we got data that was pretty good. And so I'm assuming you guys have all invested in the prior round, which was a $15 million post money. So you're all sitting very pretty right now with a hopefully a $36 million post coming up. There's still plenty of money in that round still to raise. This is the company that is doing most of its work, or actually, yeah, most of its work in Australia. And we benefit from the 43.5% rebate that we get every year from the government because of that. So for every $1 million that we spend, we're getting about $435,000 back. And that's because we do,
By work, he means the trials.
yeah,
Hmm.
everything that we do, we do the manufacturing there as well.
Okay.
So the initial drug that we had developed and has been in clinical studies for measuring the rate at which it is getting into the body was diclofenac, and it's a 2% solution. You'll recall that the existing drug there is Pennsaid. Pennsaid was acquired by Amgen and then taken off the market because generics had come in. So there are now generics. Hasn't changed anything. It's still the same drug that's being sold, of course, because it's generic. And the pricing is still pretty much the same, which is kind of obscene. It's about $100 a day just for treatment of osteoarthritis of the knee. So we're coming in with what we think is something softer and gentler. We've shown that in our trials, when we use Pennsaid after only 7 or so days, and remember, this is a chronically administered drug for pain. So you take it every single day, twice a day, and you're applying a lot of it onto your knee. It makes the knee itchy and flaky. On a scale of 4, it's a 3 or a 4 for Pennsaid, compared to ours, which doesn't make it itchy and flaky and is a 0 or a 1 on that scale. So we have a significant benefit from the way that our drug operates. We had a stable solution, and we are testing that in a final PK study, which is now ongoing. And then once we've done
And
that,
explain stable. Stable means how long it can last on
oh,
the shelf.
at least 2 years. So you
Okay.
want to
Yeah.
be be on the shelf for 2 years so that we don't have to worry about it. Every time, remember when you're looking at bottles, it says expiration date. That's what I'm talking about on those.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can still use it, but you shouldn't use it, depending on the drug it is.
So how is Voltaren doing? So Voltaren's a 1% diclofenac solution.
1%, 1%, and it's used as you wish. It's not really been approved for anything. It's never gone through the clinical studies, and it's cheap, but you need a lot of it. And it's, some people think it works, some people don't. The trouble with medicines that are used for treatment of pain is there's a very large prophylactic effect. In other words, just by putting the medicine on you, regardless of whether it's got active ingredient in it, it will make you feel better about 40 to 50% of the time. It's huge prophylactic effect. So that just shows you that when you have pain, a lot of it's in your brain as opposed to actual real pain. Um, the Pen-Said equivalent, the 2% solution that we're making, is approved for the osteoarthritis of the knee, and that's all right now. And obviously, we can extend it beyond that if we were to do the right clinical studies for that. And
So
that market,
just to sum it up, so we compared in the trial the other ones that are done, results back. That was the early money that was raised to help fund to do that.
yeah,
A side-by-side comparison of Smartech's 2% diclofenac cream delivery as a delivery mechanism against Penseds, and that's where the results were. We were really pleased with those.
yeah, very good. Um, so that one is proceeding nicely, and we need to just get ready for a phase 3 study. This is a 505(b)(2). In other words, you're comparing the prior drug to the new drug. For the FDA have told us we only need to do one study. It's a 28-day study. It'd probably be about 200 or 300 patients. We can probably get it done relatively quickly within a year once we start. And we're getting ready for that in Australia as we speak.
And that's
Um,
the bulk, that's the purpose of the bulk of the current funding, that plus advancing aspirin.
the $5 million part of the funding, yeah. So we won't start that until we get the full money in because you don't want to start a trial that you can't finish. We're going to do it in two parts. So actually, we're going to do 30 patients first as a run-up to it, so we know exactly how many patients to finish up with. So again, it's the placebo effect. We want to see what is that placebo effect and how does it compare to our drug. And once we know that comparison, we'll be able to know exactly how many patients we'll need to do. So obviously, the less patients we need to do, the quicker we get the result. Um, we are looking to do an exit on that. And remember, Smartech is an umbrella company with a platform, and we'll have multiple exits, and each of those exits come to you, the investor, as we dividend it out, or however the tax lawyers tell us to do it efficiently. The next drug, though, that got us really excited and is a much larger market potential than the diclofenac drug, which is, probably a few $100 million market, something like that, which is nice. But, and it's great for a company that's only valued at 36 million. It's absolutely fantastic. But aspirin blows that away. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of other drugs after that that blow aspirin away. But the aspirin story is enough to make anybody salivate. Aspirin has been used for about 100 years. It is the go-to drug for so many things, especially if you want to prevent a stroke or a heart attack or colon cancer. And it is given in a small dose. It's called, baby aspirin. It's 81 milligrams here in the US, and it's about 100 milligrams in Europe. It must be a metric thing, I don't know. But the aspirin is taken orally. It gets into the blood and it binds to the platelets, and that platelet binding is irreversible. And platelets are made every single day, so that's why you take it on a daily basis to make sure that all of your platelets are saturated, so they won't suddenly form a clot. So it's a clot prevention, which stops heart attacks and strokes, and it's also a mechanism by which the colon cancer is prevented. So what we wanted to do was see, could we develop a topical aspirin that previous people who've done that just found it burned the skin, because as soon as it's in contact with water, it forms salicylic acid, which is what you use to remove warts. So it's not a very nice thing to have on your skin. We found now we've got several formulations which are developing as we speak, which are able to not only do nothing to the skin, but allow the drug straight into the blood system and to bind to platelets. And we've shown that this is effective even with only a 200 milligram dose on the skin. We've also done 400 and 600 milligrams, and none of them are showing any adverse event on the skin at all. And we've shown that not only does it bind to the platelets, but it seems to bind even more quickly or better than if you're taking the drug orally. Now, we've only done one comparison for that, so obviously we need a bigger comparison, and that's what we're raising the money for. We want to do a 40-patient study. It's already ready to go in Australia. It's going to cost less than $1 million, and that data alone would probably be sufficient for us to have an exit. We're obviously thinking of going to Bayer and telling them about it and asking them if they want to do this. We also have bankers already set to go. They're waiting for us to tell them when we're ready. And all they'll have to do is
What do
make
you
that
need to do to feel ready?
the data from that 40-patient study. So as soon as we have sufficient funds, and obviously it's easier to raise that $1 million to get that going. So as soon as we have that $1 million ready to go, we'll start that trial, and then the $5 million will allow us to then do the rest of the diclofenac study.
How long does that 40-patient aspirin study take?
Not long. It's a 1 week study. And you're doing it in the confines of a controlled environment. I actually just came back from Australia because I wanted to make sure I looked at them all. There's two locations, one of which is a 72-bed location, another is a 32-bed location. So either one of them could actually do this study. And the patients are volunteers. These are just healthy patients that we need to use. And we're looking for two things. One is, does it affect the skin at all, which we already know the answer to? And the second is, does it get into the bloodstream and bind to platelets, which again, we already know. This is just showing that it will work. We also know that you can put it on the skin pretty much anywhere, even a sensitive area like under the armpit. It doesn't have any effect. So we have a high level of confidence in it. What we're working on right now is making sure that we have a stable formulation. So that's the shelf life issue. We're very close to it, if not already have one. We've gone through 3 different iterations, the second of which we believe has the shelf life, but we're looking at one further one. The secret there is to make sure there's no water in the formulation, so they can't form the salicylic acid. But because aspirin breaks down very quickly to salicylic acid, so we've set the parameter at no more than 3% of salicylic acid in the formulation at any time. And that's the safety levels that have been used for other drugs related to this. But
And one of the big advantages is that the CDC came out and said not recommending aspirin because of the potential for ulcer risk in the stomach. So this would be a very good alternative for people that have that challenge.
Yeah, very good point. In 2021, the CDC said if you haven't already had a stroke or a heart attack or had colon cancer, you shouldn't take aspirin because the risk of a gastric ulcer is greater than the prevention of such. But aspirin reduces by 30 to 40% the incidence of those. I mean, it's huge. It's a massive. I mean, it's a no-brainer if you don't have a stroke or heart attack or colon cancer, or if you're at risk from it. It's a no-brainer to want to take it. So the number of people that cannot take oral aspirin is sufficient to even show that you've got a billion or multi-billion-dollar market. The way I look at it is aspirin right now is sold at $10 per year per patient, right? For low dose aspirin, it's that cheap. So nobody is even thinking about whether it's affordable or not, or whether it's covered by insurance. They want to take it. But and that market is $3 billion. So you can see there's 300 million people taking it. Once you have a topical form, which now reduces the risk of ulcer, I think everybody will want to change that. I mean, yes, you have to change their way of thinking. You're dabbing something onto your skin every day as opposed to taking it orally, but you don't anymore have to coordinate it with a meal. So if you're taking oral aspirin, you always want to take it with a meal. So you always have to think about it from that point of view. So this is just a matter of education. But if you imagine then you charge $10 a month for the topical aspirin. Now you've made it's 12 times the size, so $36 billion potential market. You only have to get a small percentage of that to make this a massive drug. And if you so from my view of thinking of this is that you increase the number of patients that will be taking this, and by patients I mean healthy humans.
Mhm.
You've allowed ambulances now to have a cream that's around. They can just dab on an unconscious patient who's having a heart attack or a stroke, and have immediate effect. There is an injectable version available, but this will be an alternative, of course. Much easier to dab something on the skin. And you increase the number of people who now are willing to do this. So I think this is a massive opportunity. We don't need to quantify it because we just make the one phone call and hopefully they will take it on from there, and we'll keep a good upfront payment, milestones, and then royalties.
I'm gonna jump in with a question from Robert, and then Richard jump into a couple of the other uh, types of products in the pipeline, and what that might look like. So Robert asks, how would the cost of Smartech aspirin substitute compare to aspirin?
So I think we can choose whatever price we want it to be. I expect it will be more expensive, but the cost of aspirin is so cheap now, it's not going to make a difference from a point of view of whether people will use it. It's just the convenience of having something you put one drop on your skin as opposed to put a pill in your mouth.
Got it.
Before we go off of smart tech, though, if you don't mind, there are two other drugs that we're developing, which are for treatment, or sorry, prevention of breast cancer and of osteoporosis. So mainly for women, but men also suffer from osteoporosis. So these are drugs that are taken orally right now at about 60 milligrams, and only about 1 or 1.2 milligrams gets to the breast to have its action. And that is a sort of standard for taking things orally. But it means that the body is suffering from all the side effects of that extra 60 milligrams that is going around. So there are lots of side effects that have to be counted to the balance of preventing breast cancer. So this is on breast lumps that are not cancers but might turn into cancers, so you can prevent them. So if you've got a topical that you can put directly on the breast, you're doing so much better. The existing companies that tried that have all been burning the skin, which is not acceptable. And we believe that just like we did with aspirin, we would be able to get a formulation that will be for that market. And this market is a $30 billion market. Same for osteoporosis. So those are drugs that are in the pipeline that we're developing. And again, you guys who are already investors will get all of the benefit of that. So Steve, I can move on to, you want me to do Elux?
Yeah, let's jump into Elex.
So Elux, and I know we're short on time, so I'll give you the highlights on it. Elux is a company in San Diego which is removing fat in selected locations on the human body. Think about it as selective liposuction. So liposuction, you go in basically with a vacuum cleaner. You've made a hole in the skin. You go in and you are just using a cannula, a long metal rigid rod, to suck it out the solid fat. And it's kind of uncomfortable. Before you do that, you put a solution in there called a turmeric solution, which is an anti-pain medicine in there. And that allows you to at least have some liquid that you're sucking out at the same time as the fat. But the resultant fat that comes out is mixed with connective tissue, fibrous tissue, and blood. It's a nasty mess. And the result of that, about 60% of people are satisfied with the result. A lot are not satisfied. But yet it's one of the largest procedures done in the US. Now, the Wegovy is 6 cylinders that we were talking about with the Rose presentation. Obviously, they're allowing people to lose weight, and when they lose weight, they're losing the fat mass as well as muscle mass. But you get lots of loose skin around, which kind of looks like it needs surgery done to stitch it back up again. So you need a solution for how can you remove fat without making it look like you've lost fat in from the skin flabbiness type of thing. And that's where we come in. There's been two other alternatives to liposuction. One is called cool sculpting, where you take two cold plates, place skin between it, obviously fold it over with the fat in the middle, and the fat cells are killed first before the normal cells, and then the body removes the fat. You have to do that about 6 times to have the final effect, but it does work, and it's called cool sculpting. The other is Kybella, which is a detergent which you inject with a hypodermic needle. It's approved for under the neck, under the submandibular region, and it's deoxycholate is the chemical if you're thinking about it, and it will basically dissolve the fat cells, release the fat, and the body removes that fat. So you can see there's a way of getting inside the body to selectively have the body remove the fat for you. And that's where we come in. We inject gold nanoparticles, and gold, as everybody knows, is inert. So we think it's totally safe. It's gold that's already been in the human body, so we believe the FDA will approve it. You inject it into the fat area, and then you irradiate from the outside, from the skin side, with an infrared light. That infrared light is a laser light, which is used commonly in these doctors' clinics. So it's not a piece of apparatus you need to buy again or have a big expenditure on. All we're going to be doing is selling those gold particles, because when the infrared light hits, it activates the gold particles, makes them heat up, they melt the fat. That melted fat then can be removed by the body, and so there's no surgery at all, which means it's great. The doctors we've spoken to, who are our key opinion leaders and the leaders in liposuction, are very excited about it. Even though it removes the need for liposuction, you can still do liposuction, because now you're sucking out with a smaller cannula, so doing less of an intrusive procedure. Now you're sucking out the liquid fat, not the solid fat. So we've done it in mini pigs already, and the result is fantastic. I like to say that the pigs are very much happier and smile when you put lipstick on their lips as well. So sorry about that, Steve.
I've
Anyway,
heard
so
it before.
I still got a little smile out here.
Yeah, you did.
This is a company that we're raising 10 million for. It's a little bit more complicated because actually we're raising 4 million. It's at 50 cents a share, but for every share you purchase, you get a warrant to purchase another share at 75 cents. That warrant will be exercised in about 18 months when we've done the first stage, which is getting the approval from the FDA to get into humans, because we need to manufacture the gold particles, and then we need to get into the small animals and the pigs again, and that'll take about a year. And then we can go straight into humans. And on the humans, once you've done one, basically you're just repeating it. So it'll just be a matter of how many do we need to do? Probably 80 to 100 is my guess with the FDA. And that will get us the approval. So we're looking at about 2 years to 3 years to an exit. So it's not as quick as Smartech and Rose, which I'm hoping will have an exit this year, but it's 2 to 3 years for an exit once we prove that we have something that is interesting. These exits in the past, when it's been fully approved, for Kybella was 2.7 billion, and for Cool Sculpting, I think it was 2.2 billion. So we're looking at a very significant potential multiple on the present valuation. The post money, after you've done both of those 2 rounds of raising the 10 million, is $20 million. So you can see it's even at a 5x, it's only $100 million to purchase. So we're obviously hoping for a lot more than that.
So you get through the first trial before the option of exercising the warrants then kicks in. So the investor would see the success.
It's a preclinical. It's the warranties at a preclinical. So you'll know that it's working. We might have done 1 or 2 humans at that point, in which case,
Right.
no brainer.
Right.
There's a question from Robert. Do the gold nanoparticles leave the body, or do they remain? We're going to be doing that experiment. Obviously, we know that gold is inert, so it could remain in the body, no problem. But that'll be the question the FDA is asking. So we're doing the mini pig studies to see what the distribution is. In a prior study, we found that they were leaving the body either through the liver or through the lungs. So we know that most of them leave. If you suck them out with the liposuction afterwards, we believe that some will always be left behind, because these are very, very small particles. Again, so we're probably going to do the experiment where we leave them all in, because that's the best case scenario for us, where we don't have to do any liposuction to take them out. Is the metal, could you use the nanoparticles of a metal that's less expensive than gold? No. First of all, the gold isn't that expensive. You make it chemically. You're not using actual gold. You have the gold form onto particles, and the cost will come down to, I reckon it's going to be only a few dollars per dose that we need to use once we get to scale. And the scale would be 150 liters of production, and we're ready to do that. We found a company in San Diego that is able to do that for us, and that's part of the funding for the first 4 million. Most of that goes to the gold production, and making sure that's done under good manufacturing procedures, which hasn't yet been done, but we know it can be done because other people are doing it.
Good. Good. I think that's it. I'll wait a second here. If you have an additional question, just type it into Q&A. And then I'll add that if you have any questions post the call, just email me or your CMG rep, and we will get Richard to answer and get it back to you. Any last thoughts? Any last questions, Mike?
Yeah, Richard, with the Elux product, and so the gold particles are in there, you heat them up. Does that actually render the fat cells? Is there any possibility that they can sort of reform or re-solidify? Like, do they have to be taken out?
So the fat cells, if they are broken open, tend to not survive, and the body will just remove them.
Gotcha.
If there are fat cells that you've left untouched, as it were, and that's just a matter of using enough gold particles. But if they're left untouched, yes, those will stay, and they can grow like any other fat cell could grow. But we think this is a one and done, as opposed to having to do it 6 times like Cabela. But we won't know until we try.
Thanks.
Doug asks, what's the timing on the Elux round? So it's not a huge ask from Richard and team at Elux. We're raising 600,000 for them. I think we've raised 350 of it. So we'll have it done shortly. So if you're interested, this will be something we'll have to talk to you about quickly.
Well, thank you all for your patience. I appreciate you joining
Yeah.
us. Update.
Thanks for joining. I will send a summary and a copy of this once we get compliance approval, post the call, and thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Richard.